You'd think carrying a few boxes into your own cabin wouldn't be a big deal, but that's exactly when the nightmare started. It was a calm Saturday morning when I picked up my daughter, Emily, from the college dorms. She had just finished her finals and was looking forward to a peaceful summer break at our family's lake cabin. It was a tradition we'd kept since she was a child, some bonding time away from the noise and pressure of everyday life. Her face lit up when she saw the cabin again. We had a trunk full of her clothes, a couple of art supplies, her favorite lounge chair, and a few small storage boxes. The moment we pulled up to the driveway, though, the atmosphere shifted. There she was, Karen, standing across the gravel road with a mug in her hand, staring us down like we were burglars. Her signature oversized sunglasses and tightly crossed arms gave her away immediately. I nodded politely, trying to avoid any drama. "Afternoon," I said. She didn't respond, didn't even blink. She turned on her heel and stomped back into her house like we'd just spit on her porch. I should have known then something was coming. I figured she might just be in one of her moods. Karen had a reputation. Around here, she was known as HOA. Karen, even though we didn't have an official legal HOA. That never stopped her from acting like she ran the whole community. But I wasn't expecting what came next. Emily and I started unloading the truck. It was just a few personal items, a sketch pad here, a chair there. 10, maybe 15 minutes later, we were halfway through when the sound of sirens cut through the calm air. At first I thought maybe someone had gotten hurt or there was an accident on the road nearby. But no, a sheriff's SUV pulled up right in front of our driveway, lights flashing, dust swirling behind its tires. A uniformed deputy stepped out, adjusting his sunglasses as he approached us. "Good afternoon, sir," he said, professional but clearly confused. "We received a call about some suspicious activity at this residence. Something about unauthorized moving activity and possible property damage." I blinked. Was this a joke? I explained as calmly as I could that this was my cabin, that I owned the property, and that my daughter was just bringing her things in for the summer. I even offered to show proof of ownership. The officer looked skeptical until I walked him over to my truck and pulled out a manila folder with our deed, the property tax receipt, and my ID. The deputy studied the papers, glanced back at the cabin, then shook his head. "I'm sorry to trouble you, sir," he said. "This all checks out. You're clearly the owner." He leaned in a bit and added, "Between you and me, we've been getting more of these kinds of calls lately. You wouldn't happen to know who placed the complaint, would you?" I didn't even have to say anything. Both of us glanced at Karen's window where the curtain twitched suspiciously. "Right," he muttered. "Have a good day." He got back in his SUV and drove off slowly, still shaking his head. Karen, meanwhile, stood on her porch, a smug grin on her face like she'd accomplished something. I felt my blood boil, but I held it in. Emily looked shaken. "Dad, is it always like this here?" she asked. "Only when Karen's bored," I replied, trying to keep it light. But inside, I was furious. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was harassment. And not for the first time. Karen had taken her fake authority too far. She had weaponized law enforcement to bully a father and daughter, simply unloading some belongings into their own property. It was embarrassing, infuriating, and honestly, kind of scary. I looked at Emily and made a silent promise then and there. This wasn't going to happen again. Not to us. Not to anyone else on this lake. Karen thought she could get away with her petty power plays forever. She was about to find out just how wrong she was. Karen didn't always have this kind of control. But from the moment she moved into the lake community 2 years ago, things started to change and, not for the better. The neighborhood used to be a peaceful sanctuary. Families would host weekend barbecues, kids rode their bikes down the gravel roads, and people respected each other's space. It wasn't fancy, and that was part of its charm. Our cabins were all different colors, some a little rundown but full of character. It felt like home. But when Karen bought a small corner lot and moved into her overly polished modern-style cabin, she brought with her an attitude that didn't fit in at all. Almost immediately, she began asking questions like, "Who's in charge here? And where are the HOA guidelines?" At first, people assumed she was just curious, maybe eager to get involved. But it quickly became clear that Karen didn't want to join anything. She wanted to control everything. Within months, she printed out fake newsletters titled Community Compliance Report, stuffed them into everyone's mailbox, and crowned herself the acting head of the HOA committee. The thing is, there was no HOA, not legally. Anyway, years ago, a few neighbors had discussed forming one for road maintenance and shared dock rules, but nothing ever formalized. Karen seized that vacuum and declared herself the leader of a committee that didn't exist. At first, it was almost laughable. She taped handwritten notices to cabins demanding residents remove unsightly items like hammocks, garden gnomes, and flags. She wrote fake violation tickets for boats that weren't docked evenly. One family was fined $25 for hanging string lights on their porch. Most people just tossed the notes in the trash, but some, especially elderly residents or newer homeowners, got scared. They thought maybe they were breaking rules. Karen counted on that fear. She acted like a hall monitor on steroids, patrolling the neighborhood in her golf cart, clipboard in hand, snapping photos of people's yards and calling it evidence. And heaven forbid you talked back. Last summer, I made the mistake of calling her out when she tried to fine me for illegal firewood stacking. I told her point blank that her rules didn't mean anything. That's when she started targeting me more aggressively. Little things at first: complaints about my noisy wind chimes, notes about my driveway being non-st. Then came the mysterious complaints to the fire department about my grill, which passed inspection just fine. But calling the cops over my daughter moving a chair inside, that was a new level of madness. It wasn't just about me anymore. Emily was young, quiet, and completely uninvolved in any of the neighborhood drama. To see her face fall that day, her sense of safety taken away by someone's obsession with control, at a fire inside me. I wasn't the only one feeling this way. After the cop incident, I started getting texts from other neighbors. Karen struck again. One read: she called code enforcement on my fence. Another neighbor, Amanda, told me Karen had taken pictures of her backyard while her kids were playing. People were fed up, but no one knew what to do. They thought Karen had some kind of power, some hidden legal right to enforce rules. But I knew better. I went to the county clerk's office myself. I spent a full afternoon digging through public records, and guess what? There was absolutely no registered HOA, no enforcement board, no official charter. Nothing. Karen had been bluffing the entire time. Her authority was a myth, backed only by her threats and people's fear. The more I read, the angrier I got. The only thing close to a community agreement was a voluntary maintenance collective formed in the 90s that had quietly faded away over time. No one had taken the time to replace it until now. I started thinking, what if we took back control? What if we actually formed a real association, legally filed with the county, and stripped Karen of every fake power she thought she had? I drafted an email and sent it to a handful of trusted neighbors. It simply said, "Let's meet. It's time we fix this together." To my surprise, nearly everyone showed up at our cabin that weekend. We sat on lawn chairs and picnic blankets in the backyard, passing around lemonade and venting stories about Karen. It was like a therapy session mixed with a revolution. Some people were hesitant at first, worried about drama or legal issues. But once I showed them the county records and how Karen had zero legitimate authority, things changed. The fear melted into anger, and that anger turned into determination. We agreed right then to form a proper neighborhood group, not a tyrannical HOA, but a legally filed residents association focused only on basic needs like maintaining the gravel roads, keeping the shared dock in good shape, and handling common area expenses. No spying, no fines, no weird power trips. Everyone would have a vote. Everyone would be protected from harassment. And best of all, we'd have legal standing to shut Karen down for good. The first official vote we planned would change everything, not just for us, but for the entire community. Karen had started a war she never expected. And now, the people were. With the community finally united, things began to move quickly. I volunteered to handle the legal side of things since I had experience dealing with property law through my job. Within days, we formed a temporary committee and divided responsibilities. Amanda took charge of drafting the association bylaws. Tom, who had worked in civil engineering, handled property mapping. Even Mr. Langston, the quiet retired veteran who rarely left his porch, showed up with a folder full of past letters and false violation notices Karen had sent him. Everyone had a story. Everyone had been harassed. And now, everyone was ready to fight back. We officially filed for the creation of the Lakeside Residents Association, a non-profit neighborhood group registered with the county. We did everything by the book, submitted a charter, laid out fair voting rules, and established that participation was voluntary but protected by local property codes. Our goal wasn't to control people, it was to protect them from people like Karen. We made sure our bylaws strictly prohibited harassment, abuse of authority, and false reporting to law enforcement. We included privacy clauses and established a formal complaint system that required documented proof before any action could be taken. Once our application was approved by the county registrar, we mailed out welcome letters to every homeowner in the area, except one, Karen, and for good reason. You see, we had reviewed every plot on the community map, and Karen's lot didn't qualify under our bylaws. Her property was smaller than the required half-acre minimum for voting membership, and lacked direct access to the shared lakefront. That meant she wasn't eligible to join the newly formed association or influence anything it did. It wasn't personal. It was just the rules. Ironically, Karen, who had spent years enforcing fake rules on others, now found herself on the outside of a real organization that she had no control over. Once the association was approved, we held our first official vote. It was unanimous. We passed a motion to formally reject the previous community compliance rules Karen had created. We declared them null and void. Any fines, notices, or threats issued under her so-called HOA were now legally unenforceable and officially disavowed by the entire neighborhood. But that wasn't all. We also voted to adopt a neighborhood anti-harassment resolution. The resolution specifically stated that no resident could file repeated, baseless complaints with local authorities or attempt to act as an authority figure without legal standing. Violators would be subject to civil claims and trespassing bans. If harassment continued, after everything Karen had pulled from the fake fines to calling the police on me and my daughter. This was the justice we had all been waiting for. We didn't just take away her fake power, we replaced it with something real, legal, and backed by the will of the community. The next step was making sure she knew. We sent a formal cease and desist letter to Karen's address. It outlined her repeated violations, noted the new legal standing of the Residents Association, and informed her that further harassment would result in legal action. We included copies of the anti-harassment resolution, photos of her previous notices, and a signed letter from our attorney explaining that her fake HOA was never valid and that she was no longer permitted to involve herself in community matters. The letter was hand-delivered by the same sheriff's deputy she had called on me. The irony was delicious. I wasn't home when it happened, but Amanda, who lived next door to Karen, told us she stood at her door, stunned, trying to argue with the officer, claiming she had every right to maintain standards. The deputy apparently told her, "Ma'am, you're the only one who believes that." Karen went silent for a few days. No patrols, no clipboard, no golf cart. But we knew it wasn't over. Not yet. A week later, she posted a rant in the local Facebook group, accusing the new Residents Association of being illegal and calling us a neighborhood mob. She even threatened to sue for discrimination. The comments section exploded with support for us. Dozens of residents chimed in with their own experiences of being harassed by her. Screenshots of her fake violations were shared. Photos of her lurking in people's yards were posted. Even her longtime friend, Nancy from Lot 12, backed away from her. It was over. Karen tried one last trick. She contacted a local news station claiming we had created a cult-like group to silence her. The reporter reached out to us for comment, and I happily sent over the legal paperwork, our official filings, and evidence of Karen's past behavior. The story never aired. Instead, the reporter emailed me and said, "Looks like she picked the wrong guy to mess with." That was the moment it truly sank in. We had done it. We had turned a broken, toxic situation into something positive. The neighborhood was talking, again laughing, helping each other out, organizing community dinners without fear of Karen shutting them down. My daughter told me that she finally felt safe at the lake again. She even painted a beautiful landscape of the view from our dock, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. That painting now hangs proudly in the cabin living room. Every time I see it, I'm reminded of the moment we stopped being afraid and started taking action. Karen had built her kingdom on fear and lies. We tore it down with unity, truth, and a little paperwork. Karen's downfall wasn't explosive, it was slow, embarrassing, and absolutely satisfying. Once she realized her fake authority was gone, she tried to maintain control in subtle ways. She started putting up small signs on her porch that read, "This is a rules-based home, and standards matter." She posted passive-aggressive notes in her yard, like real residents follow the rules, and even mounted a little community monitor badge on her golf cart windshield. But no one cared anymore. In fact, people openly laughed at her antics. Where once people avoided her glare, now they rolled their eyes and walked right past. The sheriff's deputy even stopped by my cabin one evening, not for any complaint, but just to say he was glad the neighborhood had finally handled the situation. He said calls from this area had dropped drastically since we'd taken action. The deputy's tone made it clear Karen wasn't just a problem for us. She'd been a nuisance to local authorities for years. And now, thanks to our legally recognized association, they had grounds to ignore her bogus complaints. But we weren't done. Karen had caused too much trouble to just be ignored. Our new Residents Association had passed a vote to file an official incident report with the county, documenting her misuse of emergency services. That report included 4 confirmed 911 calls she made in under 6 months, all involving innocent neighbors and resulting in any charges or violations. Once the report was filed, Karen received a formal warning from the sheriff's department. If she made any more false emergency claims, she could face criminal charges and civil liability. The letter was certified, notarized, and signed by the county. She was furious. One morning, she stood at the edge of her property yelling at Amanda, accusing her of turning the community into a circus. Amanda, always calm, simply replied, "No, Karen, we're turning it into a neighborhood again." After that, Karen went quiet. Her golf cart stayed parked. Her binoculars vanished from the window. For the first time in years, she became invisible. Meanwhile, the community flourished. With Karen no longer meddling, residents began to breathe again. Kids played outside without being scolded for noise violations. Families hosted cookouts on their lawns. Someone even organized a movie night by the lake, something that hadn't happened in years. We installed a small bulletin board near the mailboxes where real announcements were posted, like potluck dates, cleanup days, and boat maintenance tips. It became a hub of friendly communication, replacing the fake HOA newsletters Karen used to leave stuffed in our doors. People started looking out for each other again, not spying, but actually caring. When Amanda's husband got sick, half the neighborhood showed up with soup, medicine, and even mowed their lawn. When my daughter decided to teach an art class for the neighborhood kids, she had more than a dozen outs. The place felt alive again. The transformation was unbelievable. One afternoon, I found Karen standing near the dock alone, staring out at the water like she'd lost something. Maybe she finally realized that the power she clung to so tightly had only pushed people away. That in trying to control everything, she had isolated herself. She turned to me and said, "You really think this place is better now?" I didn't argue. I just smiled and said, "It's peaceful." She scoffed and walked away. And that was the last real conversation I ever had with her. Over time, Karen withdrew more and more. She stopped posting in the Facebook group. Her house, once decorated with signs and garden flags about order and rules, became bare. She pulled her blinds shut and rarely came out except to collect mail. Eventually, she put her cabin up for sale. No one was surprised. When a realtor's sign appeared on her lawn, the group chat exploded with jokes and celebration. But we didn't gloat, we just moved forward. That's the thing about people like Karen, they thrive on attention, on the illusion of power. The worst thing you can do to someone like that isn't yelling or fighting. It's ignoring them, outgrowing them, and proving they were never necessary to begin with. After she moved out, her cabin stayed empty for a while. Then a young couple bought a TA nurse and a firefighter looking for a quiet weekend spot. They didn't care about rules or power. They brought their dog, hosted bonfires, and blended right in. The cabin finally felt like part of the neighborhood again. As for me, I still take Emily out to the lake every summer. We sit on the same dock, throw rocks into the water, and talk about life. The painting she made, the one of the lake just after sunsets, still hangs proudly in the living room. Every time I look at it, I'm reminded of how close we came to losing our peace to one person's obsession with control, but also how we stood up, together, and got it back. In the end, Karen didn't win. The community did. We didn't just ban her HOA, we reclaimed our home. And it all started with one ridiculous 911 call over a folding chair and some art supplies. Funny how things work out.